The objective that we have in today's session from a sales perspective is identifying the gaps between what we deliver and what the perception of the customer is. And there's Janessa now, and what the perception of the customer is. So, a lot of these questions are really going to be rooted in, what think we're selling versus what our customers think we're selling. And oftentimes there's a gap, and this can really become problematic at times of an issue or at times of contract renewal, or even when we're trying to upsell. So, for those of you that are not aware, I spent almost 20 years on your side of the desk as an MSP. The majority of them, I was an MSP that also ran regional data centers. And throughout my career, it gave me the opportunity to work both in the small to mid-sized market that most of us serve. And then later, I was brought in after our acquisition as a hired gun to really grow a services portfolio for a larger VAR who was really catering more to mid-sized to enterprise customers and doing more of the managed services and the fringes, things like, monitor swap outs for sustainability programs, or extended Windows, Windows refresh schedules for companies that had 4,000 employees where that wasn't done in a flash cut. And we built some interesting services around it. And it also really dealt with a different level of customer perception within the contract, and really kind of trained me that you need to be razor sharp on where the edges of an agreement is. So, we're really going to look to understand what the root causes of any gaps might be and how we can close that gap, just as I'm alluding to, with some better messaging. But with that being said, Janessa, I'm going to kind of turn it to you. And I know, from here, we've got the questions that you were looking to get more engagement on. And I know you've got some sub chapters on me on that as well. So I'll let you kind of get things going.
Okay, awesome. So where do you see the biggest mismatch between your MSP delivers in security and what clients think that they're getting?
So one of the biggest things I found when I was doing this, and again, everything I'm going to tell you about today is based on my opinion, but B, mistakes that we made along the way that we had to correct. And one of the many things that I experienced over time was the customer thinks we're giving them everything, no matter what we're selling them. Once we put them into a managed service agreement, they think we're responsible for anything that has a button, connects to an outlet, is connected to a cable, wire, or a wireless entry, and more importantly, all of the security on top of that. And we know that's not often the case in our contracts. So one of the biggest things that I found was that we're delivering our customers a security stack, and many of you might even have different levels of security stacks, but the client thinks they're getting everything. And if we don't have conversations up front, and a lot of times what I found as I started refining my approach, when I was selling, it was as much telling them about what they were not getting as it was about what they were getting. Sharing with them, look, this is going to cover everything up to X, Y, and Z. Or included in this is all of this, but not included will be this, this, and this. There are optional services for that, or we can look at extending this. But if you don't share where the out of bounds is, oftentimes you get a mismatch in between what the customer thinks they're getting and what you're getting. And a lot of times our contract language does not go deep enough, deep enough into that mismatch right up front. We don't do it. And to your point, Jose, I agree. I wish sales made this clear, because a lot of times it comes with salesperson confidence. Obviously, I was a pretty mature salesperson, as I was going through my MSP sphere. We'll negate my first 5 years, let's say. But, once you get to that point of confidence, you don't have a problem talking about the edges. The customer actually wants to hear about it. But a lot of salespeople, especially if they're junior, just want to make the sale. And they want to help the customer go, yeah, this is everything you're going to get. It's going to be great. We're going to take care of it all for you. And then those borders get very blurry. So definitely a problem there.
So Brian, is this something that's happening around compliance, response monitoring, or anything else in the space?
It's really almost anything. So let's start just with everybody's base level, MSP offerings. One of the biggest things that cause cloudiness for a customer is when you have multiple MSP offerings. And I know this is almost a religious conversation. Some people believe very strongly in having multiple offers. Some are like, no, I want one offer, take it or leave it. I was from the one offer, take it or leave it school because I didn't want my team having to try to understand, do I do this or do I not do this for a customer? If I wanted to get to a simplified standard operating procedure for my help desk, as an example, all customers really had to be created equal in what they ask. And when you create everything equal, it becomes a lot easier to share that with the customer so they know where the defined boundaries are too. So, it's not just one single product. You get that when you're selling an MSP contract. If you're adding compliance as a service and you're not defining that, well, actually, let's take a step back. You just sold a customer a security stack, but that doesn't necessarily include oversight, right? And now they think everything's going to be accomplished and you're watching every minute of what's going on too. And you may not be. Again, we are in things like SOC and EDR, but we're not watching compliance as drift occurs necessarily. And it's just those cloudy, murky areas that we're not defining for the customer. Or if we're giving them too many options and they buy the cheap one, but they think they're getting the Cadillac, these things lead to difficult discussions later down the road and could even be damaging to the relationship if problems occur and what they think's being covered isn't covered. And either they're slapped with a big bill or they end up with a vulnerability that we're not, I won't say we won't resolve, but you know where I'm going on that we're either resolving on our dime for the sake of the relationship, but still there's that distaste that goes with.
Yeah, for sure. So are you seeing, or do you see patterns across multiple clients when you were running a desk?
Well, when I was running it, the patterns I saw is that once we got to the point that we got rid of the gold, silver, bronze approach, less questions about what they were getting occurred. It really became much simpler. And again, part of that was we refined our sales process to make sure they knew where the edges were. And we clearly defined in our proposals. Our proposals got a little bit more detailed in this process as well, because we called on them to refer customers back to where the edges were. So I've seen a lot of MSPs go out kind of with a one-page price sheet. Hey, here's your managed service. These are the things you're going to get. And there's some, kind of bullet pointed services. But we went to the step where we had kind of a simple price list that was at the front end of the proposal so people could get to it quickly. But then we had a definition of service, if you will, or, similar to a terms of service, but a definition of the services we provide, the working hours, the ways to contact us, what is included on a workstation, what is included on a server, as an example. So it was really defined. Now it was on the customer to read it. But then when we came into one of those situations later where they're like, I thought you covered that, I'd say, no, we don't. Again, refer back to our contract. You'll see exactly what we cover under servers, and it stops here. Now, in some cases, I would throw we'll take care of it for you because if it was something simple that we knew we can get done pretty quickly in the spirit of a relationship, but no, next time I'll have to charge you for that. I'm never going to say it was perfect, right? We would make some of those concessions. But then then by referring them back to the contract, it forced them, at least at that stage, to actually read what was included. And many of them would come back and go, ooh, I didn't know what wasn't included. How do we get this, this, and this? And, again, that's where for those of you that are doing the banded or, the different versions, you could potentially bump them up. But I think it's better to say, oh, well, now if you need that, now we're going to layer on a different type of service. Not just a gold, silver, bronze, but really a new approach model, if you will.
Gotcha. Let's switch to the next question. Perfect.
Yep.
So when clients say we thought that was included, what are they usually referring to?
So I think we touched upon a lot of that in the last question, really. What they're referring to is they think that anything's really connected to the wire, if we don't explain the edges, belongs to the contract. And, when a customer is thinking about anything in technology, think about application problems, right? As an example, we don't own the application, but we're the first call for a technical issue. They will come to us and go, I thought that was included. Why aren't you going to fix my application? I'm like, well, one, we don't do your application. And two, we can work with the vendor if they need our support, and that is covered under contract. But if they need us to make changes that are different than what our configurations are, that's going to be, a new project, if you will. And, again, they think that oftentimes that you're responsible for everything, their apps, their infrastructure, their security, their compliance, their reporting. And many of us do that work with, it's the old, we give away the cow with, or give away the milk without selling the cow, if you will. We give that stuff away in the spirit of a relationship, but we're actually creating a more tougher environment for us to put constraints on long term. So, when they go, I thought that was included, it's also their way of going, I don't want to pay for it. And, we thought that was included was a way to try to work us for not getting paid. But I think you need to stand your ground in many cases and say, here's why it's out of bounds. Here's why it's not included in your contract, and here why it's going to require some, new project dollars, if you will.
I'm going a little off script on this, but I'm wondering, do you have any specific stories that you can, or anecdotes that you can share with us of your time as an MSP where someone did this and how you overcame that while still salvaging the relationship?
Well, look, I think I've gone in a little bit in salvaging the relationship is sometimes you got to make the concession, right? Or, but more importantly, if I dug my heels in, like I had a customer that was always trying to get us to engage with their line of business application for calls that had nothing to do with infrastructure. And I'm going a little bit back to the client server days here, but they would be like, oh, we need you on this call because they're going to tell us how we build a workflow for, moving our patients through the queue faster. And I'm like, there's no reason for us to be there. But what if they need you to make a change on the server? And really what the customer is saying is we want you and these guys to be on the same call. So as soon as we're done, we have what we want. But that's an unfair ask of most MSPs. A, we have to schedule a resource. B, we don't even know if we're actually going to do any of the work. So now it's costing us time to potentially be on a call. And I've been on many of these calls where they're talking about things and I'm like, why am I here? There's nothing I'm going to change here. This is strictly an application problem or an application request. So a lot of times when that would happen, if that happened once, maybe, I let it go. If it happens twice, now it's the old, once you fool me, second time I fool you, or once I fool you, you fool me, whatever that lovely analogy is. But the point is, I would go to the owner. And again, you got to have some design, you've got to take a leadership role in this. And I would go to the owner and go, hey, I just want to make you aware, we've been now on 2 phone calls with your application vendor where it was strictly about workflow and configurations through the app. And we cannot afford to be on those calls. Those are calls where my engineers are being taken away from doing other work, potentially for you and for other customers, to be on a call where they're not required or not needed. Now, that said, if they determine they need us on that call, we'll be happy to jump on a call with that vendor when we know that there's steps that we're going to have to take. But your team's starting to lean on us as a translator. And we're not there to do that job, and sometimes that was really what they were doing is we don't understand the text, so you'll translate it for me. So that's kind of, one example of something that we incurred when I was an MSP that just, you got to get past that or you're going to be on calls every day that have no bearing with you.
Gotcha. Thanks, Brian.
And if they want you to be on those calls, it's a great way to build a fractional VCIO program. Seriously, like if they want you to be on software evaluation calls, things like that, those are things that go above and beyond. And you can build a fractional VCIO program to say, look, we're going to help you with vendor selection, vendor assessment, vendor management, vendor calls, and really now start getting paid for that time, which I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so how are you currently positioning your security offering with tools, features, or business outcomes?
This is a question I wish we built a poll for everybody, because I'd really like to understand from the audience how they're doing it. And if you guys are willing to do so, just put in chat, are you putting an offering that's tied to tools? Are you selling it as a feature-based offering, or are you selling it on an outcome-based offering? What I'm seeing is when folks kind of went into the MSSP side and started doing security, they built their security stack. We love to build a stack, right? And we got a bunch of tools there, but then the same problem happened. We had our gold, silver, bronze, levels. And now all of a sudden the customer didn't have security incident monitoring, let's say, and an incident happened and we didn't have the forensics and a claim didn't get paid. So it's one of those areas that by not defining our projects or just putting tools at it, we're not defining the edges of what we're really responsible for. And when I look at the 3 things that you've got listed in your slide, I really look at tools are the source of generating the opportunity to provide the customer something. The features that come out of those tools are how I'm going to assemble the security that I'm able to provide. So I can provide EDR, MDR, I can provide SOC, capabilities, I can provide identity management. And each one of these things that sits on kind of the wheel, I'm able to pull together those features that come from it, allow me to build a zero trust environment, let's say. But at the end of the day, once I get that zero trust environment, how am I taking it to market? And what am I saying to the customer that we do cover? And what are we not covering? Because again, a lot of them, and now let's throw compliance into the mix because that's such a hot conversation these days. A lot of them think by buying your security stack, you're also going to make sure that they're CIS compliant, or your NIST compliant or those kind of things. And the reality is you're not just by getting a tool stack. All the governance, all the people and process still needs to be defined. And that's a whole other service. So that's an opportunity, to build another layer to what you're doing here. So, I'll admit when we were an MSP, we came out with our first security thing and we were totally tools based. Hey, here's a bunch of tools that you can subscribe to and it's going to better protect your environment. And very quickly we saw nobody understood what that meant. And again, we were getting asked for things that we felt were not covered, but immediately the customer felt they were covered. And we probably gave away 2 or 3 audit readiness projects, which are very lucrative, in the spirit of keeping our customer relationships, then educating them that that's only a 1-year thing, though. Next year, it's going to be a little bit differently. So look at how you're positioning things, guys, and say, am I selling just a collection of tools and putting them into a package, a gold package, and not really defining those edges again, or telling them what that really is going to provide them? If that's a little gray, just look at how you can make that a little bit more clear.
So what language in particular do you think that clients latch onto the most versus like things that they ignore?
Well, I mean, they latch in to the all-in concept, right? So if you say, if this is an all-you-can-eat MSP contract, they latch onto that. But now they think that's truly all you can eat. They might even question why they're paying for hardware, right? And I joke with that a little bit, but the truth is that they grasp onto, hey, statements that are made in the sales call, we take care of everything. Just give a call to our help desk and we'll resolve that. We're going to see we're going to be proactive and see all threats before they come in. And we all know the hackers are one step ahead of us. And the problem is when they hear those things through those conversations or even see them in black and white, depending on how you're writing the sales side of your proposal, it opens the door for, a disconnect when something actually happens. We all know we can't, the only way we can make a network 100% secure is unplug all the machines, lock the doors, put a hammer through all the hard drives, and then leave. And then we maybe can be secure. But, so things are going to happen. And if we've made the wrong statements along the way, or we don't have the right language, even from a sales perspective, there can be confusion, when an incident happens. Hope I answered that for you correctly, Janessa.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to the fourth question. So what assumptions do clients commonly make about being secure after signing up with an MSP?
So again, clients think, what I experienced is once they signed a contract with us, there was just this feeling that, okay, now everything's taken care of. And there's nothing that should go wrong, right? And we had this problem, especially early on when I was an MSP. Customers would sign on with us. We'd be with them for a month. There'd be some proactive monitoring, but then somebody would have a machine problem, or somebody, or a server would have a problem based on an update or something that came out from Microsoft going awry. And they'd be like, oh, you said once this happened, these things wouldn't happen to me anymore. We were never going to have those problems again. And I think you got to, again, it goes back to it's conveying that, hey, these are still machines, just like your car. They can break down, but we're going to do everything we possibly can to keep them tuned up right so those opportunities become less. The conversations you need to have about is not about being secure, but mitigating security events in the process. So mitigating security events, reducing risk. We're never making them secure. Hey, guys, just having your lights on, you have a risk that's on the table. When you sign with us, that risk lives. The inherent risk is there. But now as you start working with us, we're going to reduce that risk, mitigate some of those incidents from happening as often, and really taking on that this is a journey. This is a journey we go on. We're going to continue to tighten it up. We're never going to be in the free and clear because new threats are going to come up every day. But you're buying us because we have a group of people that are that are staying abreast of all these issues, as opposed to potentially one person that you have in a silo in your own business. And we're going to help protect you to the best of both of our abilities, as long as you work with us. And when we guide you to new solutions, because new threats emerge, you're going to take on those threats. And that's another thing. They think once they signed up with you in 2018 for security, they were set for the rest of their lives if they stay on contract. But I think every one of the people on this call already knows that 2018 was a dramatically different time than it is today. The threats are totally different. We were fighting different fires back there, and security stacks have probably gotten deeper over that time as well. And customers have had to adapt. But again, a lot of times there's this misnomer. Once I get you guys on contract, all my problems should go away. And really, it's more about mitigating risk and reducing those events from happening.
Gotcha. So where do you think most of these assumptions come from? Like, is it sales language, marketing language?
Sales and marketing language more often than not. And then again, not a clear, and then I'll push on onboarding a little bit as well. Sale is made. How do you onboard the customer into this post sale? When you onboard them, there should be a redefinition of the edges. Most of the time, the onboarding person is not the salesperson. So they can kind of ferret out, hey, did our sales guy do a really good job of selling this, but not really a good job of defining the edges, and reestablish those edges. And there could be some rockiness that comes in there, right? There could be some risk even to the relationship at the early onset there. But you want to make sure that during the onboarding process, the customer is being communicated as we're taking the intake steps, what that means to them for the long term. So they know what this program is really going to feel like when they get into it. And if they really feel like they've been sold short, that's when you escalate to an executive and get that talk going on, because maybe there's some work that can be done, to placate. But really, if that's the case, then you have a sales problem fundamentally. And now you've got to dig in with your sales team and go, really, how are you positioning this guy so we don't have these kinds of communication issues again?
That's such a good point. I'm thinking, what can MSPs do in a leadership position to ensure that there's continuity in their team to make sure that the person that's implementing these processes is also on the same page as the person that's selling it to the consumer?
Well, first of all, everybody should understand what the contracts include, right? I think that goes from, the executive through the sales teams, through the techs in the field, right down to the help desk first and foremost, because they usually are the first in the line of sight. And again, that's why you want simplification. Having different levels can immediately cause confusion because people will interpret levels slightly differently, the gold, silver, bronze mentality. If you can get to a single stream resource of what you're offering, let's say a single core MSP program and a single security program, absent of a compliance program or a fractional VCIO, which usually sits on top of that. I think of MSP and security as your operational stack, and then you've got your advisory stack on top of it. So what we need to do is kind of make sure everybody understands, hey, these are the basic things that are included, the basic things that aren't included. Onboarding technicians have to be trained that what you're listening for is inconsistencies on what the customer thinks they're getting and what they're really getting, because that will very early stage, before problems actually start hitting the help desk, allow us to realign on whatever the sales proposition was. Yes, you have a risk that customer might walk at that point, but if your customer thinks they bought much more, you're going to have much bigger problems down the road. Usually these things with the right conversations can be resolved, at that stage. And then at that point, leadership has to go back to the sales team and do either a retraining, a re-understanding, or sit one-on-one with that one resource if it's, if you determine after a couple of onboardings that it's an individual problem, and make sure they understand how to convey it. Onboarding, the same thing. They have to take all the steps that they do, make sure they're completed, everything is documented. So now when it gets passed to the service teams, your on-site engineers, your level ones, level twos, they have a clear understanding of who the customer is, what they contain, and then based on your contracts, they know how to serve them. And again, that's not an easy thing. I know if I probably ask for a show of hands, half of them would go up. It's tough to get everybody working the same way on the wheel, but it's something you have to work towards. We had, when we finally sat down and said, look, we're going to have one master agreement. These are our services that extend off of it. Again, it was one core MSP service, one core security service. Then we had our advisory bundles. Once we got to that stage, it was very easy for then our managers to sit down with their teams and be very clear. This is what this includes. This is what it doesn't include. And we have even built a battle card that we took the things that are commonly asked for that were outside the box of what we were looking for. And we we built a battle cord. Here's everything that we provide. Here are things that are commonly asked for that are not covered under this engagement. Core MSP, people would think they immediately had the security program as well. Well, no, those aren't included, so they need to subscribe to that. And it gave that, and for the help desk, if they could uncover an opportunity and bring it back to sales, we rewarded them. We would spiff them, and this was a way that it also kept them on their game. I'm getting a little deeper into the operational versus the sales side, but everybody's part of the sales process as far as I'm concerned. Some of my best salespeople were our help desk uncovering new opportunity that was expansion opportunity in our clients, based on what just conversations they were having on the phone while fixing problems.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Last question, you kind of already answered this, but are we unintentionally, as the MSP community, reinforcing the assumptions that clients commonly have about being secure continuously with your company?
I don't think anybody's putting out a false perception. I think it's the customers understanding as business people and not, traditional IT people, where those starts and stops are, right? And, and where those starts and stops really, occur for a customer is during that sales process, during that onboarding process. But the other thing is we got to make sure that our sales and marketing material aligns to what our contracts say. A lot of us subscribe to great services that are out in the marketplace that give us pre-built this and pre-built that sales slick. And it might be defining things that we're not covering within our program. And then you've got a bigger problem because the customer's holding a sales sheet that they got from you and a proposal, and the two do not meet, right? And now really we're on the hook at that point. So, especially if you're changing programs, like if you are at that point where you might be consolidating from a gold, silver, bronze down to a silver one, go look at your sales materials and go, do these still fit what I'm what we're selling today? Because a lot of those slicks are being used during the early sales process. Customers hang on to them, and if there's inconsistencies, it's really really difficult to stand up to them, at that point in time because they got something in print. And I know people that are still using the same slicks that they were using in 2020, have the same website and web content that they had in 2020, yet they've changed their programs three times during that period. Again, those things can lead to confusion down the road. Every artifact you have is part of the sales process. It's not just a proposal. It's not just a marketing slick. It's not just your website. It's not just your people. All of them need to be working in harmony ultimately to go from sales to transition to onboard to steady state operations. And if they're all not singing from the same, songbook, as they say, things can be really confusing.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Unfortunately, we're at 2:30. I had a lot of other questions prepared, so I think we'll probably have to split this up.
I'm sure we can do more sales conversations in the future as well. I'm glad we got this one today. It got me thinking back a little bit too, as you told me what you wanted to cover today. I'm like, ooh, what gotchas am I going to have? We do have a question that came up. So for those of you that need to drop off, thank you as always for joining us. Again, we do this every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. That said, I've got a few minutes. I do want to answer any questions that come up. From Jose, we've got RV CISO service, our extra, but clients expect that as part of their MSA too. The other problem is that customers, think of projects as opportunities to change things that are not covered in the MSP. It's a hard perception to clean up. You need to refresh your network equipment. You quote and your client says, why do you charge for everything? So what I see is potentially an opportunity there, Jose, in that approach. One, first of all, I was never a fan of the all-you-can-eat contract that included project dollars. So my contracts were structured very much that, hey, these are the things that we provide, call it the monitoring, call it the first level help, or, the level 1, level 2, level 3 help desk in support of everything that was in. But, desktop support. But once it came to anything where, new hardware was going on site or something like that, it would be a project. And we defined that very clearly. We even had a section that said examples, when we said projects are outside that, we listed an example of 4 or 5 of the most common projects we had at that point in time, which would be things like desktop refreshes, new firewall installs, things like that. So they knew that there was going to be an additional charge to that. I also made it very clear during the sales process that when you're buying a managed service agreement, it's really support. So it's the support of the infrastructure that you're defining and we're taking on from you. It's meant to keep your people operational, and it's meant to keep keep things proactively managed. Anything that becomes a new element to that can ultimately join the support contract, but starts with a project to bring it on board. And that was a way that I also kept things very clean right from the first sales call of where that fence lived. Then when it comes to the vCISO service, I think that's something you always have to layer out, because not every customer is going to require it, as much as I would love that to be the case. For some of your smaller customers, getting them a solid security stack, putting those tools in place and getting them the back-end SOC services and EDR and MDR services that they require is enough for them to be proactively managed. And you're probably, keeping an eye out for alerts too. When we start talking about a vCISO program, we're really talking about leadership. Hey, we also have the ability where we can step in and be an extension of your team and really help you get your internal security programs organized. We can help you draft policies. We can help you draft procedures. We can help you ensure that the technologies you're selecting for security are best of breed. Now, if you're the MSP, that's usually already the case. Then we can help you with any compliance concerns, certainly build you a risk register and help you with risk management. These are all leadership services, at least from my seat. They're not tactical operational services. There's a blurry line there, of course, but these are really things where, hey, you don't have somebody to lead this and you don't really know this, but you're concerned about it. At a bare minimum, every customer should at least be concerned that they're protecting the IP of their existing employees, right? I'm sure Janessa wants to make sure that her security number is not getting out because I have a less than protected system and I don't have a way to put some oversight to it. So you've got to really kind of separate those things out. But what I see here is you really have an opportunity to maybe look at your own agreements and go, where do we put the hard line? And then an opportunity to educate your customers. Support is everything we need to keep the existing infrastructure we've named here operational. When we have to refresh it or we have to get new, that is a project, but those things can be brought in under support on day 2 and then become supportable objects. And then the vCISO, you've really got to assess your customer. Do they have a need truly for a security leadership person? If they're regulatory bound, you almost can say guaranteedly, because they probably don't have somebody that's keeping track of their policies for annual reviews, as an example, or other time-based needs that are part of the compliance process. So I hope that helps a little bit, Jose. And for any of you that don't know, you can get it right off our website. We do have a guide that kind of shows you how to build out a vCISO program, what services should be included and what the roles and responsibilities should be. If you don't see it on our website, feel free to shoot me an email at bdoyle@vciotoolbox.com, and I'll be happy to make sure that you get a copy as well. Any other questions, folks? I don't see anything else in the open Q&A. Jose, thank you for your questions and participation today. Anybody else want to jump in with anything before we close out the day today?
Bye, everyone.